I'm Dan. I run two businesses. I run Studio Output, which is a design and branding business. It's about 20 of us. We're in Farringdon, been going 17 years now. I also run a film and animation company called Found. Found's about 12 people now. We're part of a kind of group of businesses. We've also got an events business called Glug and a VR game studio called Maze Theory. So we've kind of over the years made things complicated for ourselves. And as you'll see in some of these stories, that's kind of got us to where we are. But I suppose what I wanted to do today was not show you any nice pictures. Yeah, it was kind of obviously pick up on what the guys have invited me here to talk about today. And in quite a nerdy way, I was like, this is kind of exciting because as the guys, I got quite excited on the Skype talking about all these stories I remembered. And even when Ashley was saying, I was like, oh, yeah, there was that, and there was that, and there was this bastard, and things like that. So it's interesting because you leave things behind, but you also then reflect on what you've learnt from it and how things have moved on. And I think this kind of cliched, but this idea I sort of took from it. It's like, well, the whole thing with contracts is it brings people together, and I think that really for me is the whole thing. The contract doesn't have to be this kind of harsh, legal, cold, binding thing. It's about sort of, it's about partnership. One of the things that we kind of said to ourselves when we set up all those years ago was that we wanted to make great work for interesting people, but we wanted to work with clients, not for clients. And it's maybe a bit kind of cheesy, but the point was that when we set up in Nottingham in 2002, it was a 9 till 5 industry. It was kind of, we saw people setting up in London, doing weekends, doing kind of all-nighters and thinking there's got to be a different way of doing things. And that's kind of where that came from, but also seeing the kind of the imbalance of respect and trust between client and agency, and some of the stuff that Ashley talked about where you feel like you've got to over-deliver, you feel like you can't ask for more and things like that. So I suppose what I want to kind of ramble into today is some of those things that we picked up along the way, and the lessons I've eventually learned after 17 years of doing things. So yeah, as I said, it wasn't always this way. So back in the noughties, this is me in our old office with I think that's an Apple Mac 6400 in a corner, and that's a fax machine, if you can see it. So yeah, when we set up, I was 26. I've done 3 years in a kind of club flyer sweatshop. That was my background. And, this is kind of how nuts it was back in those days. The three of us who set up, we'd all bought houses. I bought a house for 50 grand. Could have bought it the year before for 32 grand. And, it's not even a deposit these days, is it? But the work we were doing, the kinds of businesses we were working for, at that time was great in the sense that it was local shops, it was local record labels, local bars and stuff. So it was, it was an eat, shop, drink, dance kind of mentality. But with that came sketchy people, came kind of businesses that didn't last long, kind of conversations we were having with them. And it meant that you also were living in each other's pockets. These were people that you'd go and see at lunchtime and buy trainers off them, and then, you didn't know where things were going. And I think I tell myself that, these things kind of shaped us and that we learnt these lessons, but, if we could go back in time and meet Ashley, then, I wouldn't have to do this talk. So, but yeah, I think I've always said to myself, well, I learned the hard way, and that was, I think, the only way to learn. And the thing is with learning the hard way, you learn important lessons, but I was talking to one of our designers in the office today, and he said, well, you're going down there to network, pick up business. I was like, no, not at all. This is kind of for people, hopefully, to not make the mistakes we have. So, hopefully you guys get something out of it. But yeah, so in the early days, I've got kind of 4 episodes. The first one is going bust. It's not us going bust, but one of our early clients who we kind of inherited from the old business we worked for were a shoe shop, knew the guy well who ran it, and one day found out it went bust. And it was only like a year into business. I think he only had us a couple of grand, but it was, I think the reflection for me on that was not so much the money thing, but I felt quite personally affronted. And I think for a long time I didn't really understand how it must have felt for him as well, because he was like a sort of, a key figure within the city. sort of walking around afterwards thinking, well, are these people money, are these printers money, are these landlords money? And I remember sort of wrestling with myself for a while thinking, well, you know, I've kind of given him a load of shit for $2,000. He probably owes someone else a load of money who's got a contract on his head or something like that. So I thought that was my first experience of it, and it was an eye opener, because you're like, okay, these things can creep up on you. People aren't going to tell you, and I think this was the thing that was a real surprise for me. You know, when it came into the sort of the first time that we thought, right, we need to do something about it, we went down the small claims court, which is just called the claims court these days, but I don't know if anyone's sort of used this over the years, but it's, you know, we had, I think this was a DJ duo in London who they're just useless, you know, and I think this is the thing sometimes sometimes you get people who, like Ashley said, you have real ding-dongs. Sometimes you get people who are they're just flaky as hell. And I think at that point and at that time of sort of the mid-noughties, we were dealing with a lot of kind of people who had sort of essentially nocturnal businesses, and you're trying to kind of get things out in the daytime when they've been up all night doing whatever. So this one we did the work, delivered it, and they just couldn't be asked to pay. So went down a small claims route, and this was a real eye opener, because this was a lot of paperwork. Essentially, you pay to do the paperwork yourself, enter it in. You don't have to go to court, but it's a pain in the arse. It used to be that if it's under 10 grand claim, you can do this, and things are fairly successful. But I think we ended up getting paid something like £100 a month from it. So it's you know, you're just like, Jesus Christ, is it worth it? But I think, you know, again, it's one of those where you think, okay, I don't want to be in that situation again, until you get into the next situation. So about 2 years in, we developed an ongoing relationship with a bar chain down here. And this was back in the day when, you know, there was no social media, so it was flyers, we were print handling, we were doing a lot of print through a friend of ours in Leicester who's kind of used to do it at night time, dodgy stuff, and we started to kind of get alarm bells when they were like, no, you need to invoice this in a different limited company. And it got to the point where every bar had a different limited company that changed every few months. You look like you've had all these experiences. And it got to the point where we're like, right, we're in danger of really kind of getting ourselves into a sticky situation here, and realising that things like the small claims, the other things just weren't going to work. So we started looking into what those different solutions were. And my dad's best mate was ex-CID, he was a private detective, so he was talking me through things around, well, this is how the bailiff system works, these are the different options here. And, you know, I was thinking, I don't think this is going to work. And I was having a parallel conversation with our printer in Leicester, who was this kind of charming bodybuilder guy, drove a Lamborghini and did all this print work. And he said, yeah, I've got a couple of guys who can help you. One's a Serbian hitman, and one's this kind of creep who goes around taking pictures of people and scaring the shit out of them. And we were like, right, okay. And I remember going back to my dad's mate, and he said, look, so you can do all these things, but you just have to be prepared that if you do this, you've got to be prepared for it to be done to you. And that was a real lesson for me of like, you know what, it's just money. You know, I don't want to get myself into this situation, and I certainly don't want someone kind of coming round for their, you know, to get their kneecaps back off me. So, yeah, that was interesting. And then the next time, and actually there was another one which your talk reminded me of, which is deep in the pit of despair. But, you know, we'd done a lot of sorting out off the back of that one, because that was hard cash, and that was 2 years in, and that was, you know, you kind of, when you see why these things happen because you've given people too much credit or you've given people too much trust, you feel like an idiot as well, because you think, fuck, I should have seen the signs. Just like you were saying, actually, you need to listen to your gut. And as I'll come to later, we've sort of somewhat belatedly over the years tried to sort of build in the process to do that. But I had a situation, this was probably 10 years ago, done a piece of work for this client, all went fine, then we were doing a film for them, and I suppose I'd got a bit seduced by them. I was like, look, we'll get it going, they've got sort of problems setting up the account there, and let's crack on. And even more stupidly, delivered the work. So not only had I kind of given them credit, I'd then given them the work, so we didn't have any kind of collateral to sort of leverage. So the key thing here, having spoke to my friend who was a lawyer, was that they hadn't questioned the payment, they just weren't responding. So they hadn't said, no, this is not up to scratch, or no, I'm not going to pay it. They'd just gone silent. So she said, well, look, in that situation, you can issue a statutory demand, which is this thing which you can actually do yourself. You'll probably know more than me, actually. I think it's a few £100. You do the paperwork. You get this piece of paper, and it's a very powerful thing that you can then send to whoever owes you the money, and that carries a lot of gravitas with it. I think they've got something like 7 or 21 days to pay. Then you get what's called a winding up petition, which they've then got another 7 or 21 days, and then they've got a winding up order, which if they don't pay it, the court will close their business. So it's mega powerful. But it's also, you kind of like, oh, fuck, I'm going into battle here. This is proper like, what's going to happen here? So, and I think I felt so personally responsible because I knew that I'd cocked up the process. I was like, this is my fault, I've done this. So the guy said, well, look, we can send someone around. I was like, no, I need to go around. God knows why. So turned up to their office, hadn't been there before. It was on Piccadilly Circus, opposite what was Tower Records. Sort of big place in the penthouse. Got to reception. They're like, no, they're not taking visitors, you can't go in. I was like, oh, shit. So anyway, managed to sort of get my way in, go up to the lift, open the door, and empty office. And this little lady comes out, and she's like, oh no, they're not here. And I was like, oh man, this is hearts going sort of 10 to the dozen. It's kind of like, what the hell's going on? Eventually the FD comes out, who's the guy I'd been speaking to, and I was like, look, you know what this is, you know what you need to do, just get on with it. And I had this kind of weird feeling afterwards of like, kind of excitement, trepidation, sort of like, oh, I've done it, now what happens? And we got the money the next day. But I did not expect it, and it was one of those things where I was kind of like, that cannot happen again, because I don't want to be kind of marching up to someone. And I don't know why I did it. I think I did it because I felt so sort of personally responsible and let down my partners that I'm the process guy and I've not done the process thing. So, yeah, and like I say, for me, there was that, there's nothing like that to drive sort of behavioural change. But, go with Ashley. Because, trust me, you don't want to go through some of those things. So, they were a long time ago, and as I'll come to at the end, there's things we do now to kind of onboard clients which, touch wood, have meant that we haven't had most of those issues for a long time. But where we're at now is that, we've got much bigger clients, nationals, multinationals, internationals, but they don't always equal an easy life. That's the thing. It's, you tend to get paid, but it's a case of getting paid eventually. And, the big thing with it is that, for example, we started a job the other day. I mean, the way we bill is that we get deposit up front. I'll come on to the details of that. But this client, they'd just been taken over by a US company, and they're like, our payment terms are now 60 days. Nothing we can do about it, it's just been set up. We did a lot of work 5 years ago for Boots. I don't know if anyone's worked for Boots before. They pay on 120 days, and then they take 2% at the end, just for the pleasure of completely screwing your cash flow. So, and I think the other thing with it, especially if you've got a business which, like Found, our kind of film and animation companies, with Found, it's very project based, and it tends to be each piece of work is for a new client rather than kind of agency thing where you're going to be doing repeat work. So you spend a lot of time doing the onboarding, doing the client setup, getting set up as a client, doing credit checks, all that stuff. And because it's a production for an ad agency, by the time you've done that, you're kind of halfway through the shoot. You might have already fronted the cash and things like that. So that can be a real pain in the arse as well, because we've almost soured a client relationship before we started, because we said, we're a small business, we can't front this $100,000 shoot, and they're like, because they're people we work in a big agency, and I don't care, it's not my money. So it's things like that which are really interesting, because you see it from their side of things. And what we've started to do with Found is kind of go, well, if we're dealing with a WPP agency, for example, and we're doing work for them, we just have to trust that it will get set up, but we'll get paid slowly, because otherwise you can screw the relationship up before you start, because you're having financial conversations with creatives who are just like, what, leave me alone, I want to make an ad. you know, I'd started writing down stuff about insurance policies and all this. And I was like, we've never claimed on them. It's not for me. I don't have a lot to say about it. And when Ashley talked me through how she was going to talk about it, well, it's a far more interesting way of doing it. I think for me, you know, my learning over the year has been to kind of almost put a sort of prevention is the best cure. Is that the right word? You know, kind of get things sorted up front so that when you get into bed with the client, you know they're the right one, and hopefully you're not finding out things sort of later down the line. Because, you know, I think it's also just really important to be comfortable talking about money, because it is a hard thing. You know, we're selling creativity. Most of us are probably making that creativity. It's a thing that's in your heart, and it feels quite sort of kind of alien and almost sort of like, oh, I don't want to talk about the money side of things, but it's so important to set it out so that people are like, okay, cool, yeah, this is a business transaction. And, you know, as I say at the end, don't be afraid to say no, because it is really powerful. And, you know, stuff I haven't covered in here, but it's sort of related, is clients that we've walked away from, clients that we've sort of resigned from, because it's all around that kind of trust. And I think that sort of balance of relationship of like, you know, are we, you know, am I being equally valued, or are people taking a piss, or, you know, you want to feel like you can do the best work, and they'll be like, fuck, you've done all this stuff, rather than just like, you know. And I think it's really important, which is why I think that's the key thing to me, is like, we don't have to say yes to everything. We have to be really kind of clear what we're doing, and I think really clear that you're going to enjoy working on something, because if you enjoy working something, even if the product at the end is not the best it could be, you still had that good experience. And I think, you know, for me, especially having done it this long, is you want to, you know, if nothing at the end of the day, you can be happy, then okay, if we lost that 15 grand 12 years ago, it's like, who gives a shit? I haven't lost my house or things like that. So I think that's it. Yeah, cheers. I am not particularly active on social media apart from LinkedIn, so if you want to be hounded with sales emails, there you go. Yeah, so that's the Twitter links for Studio Output and Found. And yeah, that's my sort of war story ramble, so thanks for listening.